Hi, good evening, everyone. I am super excited and it is my privilege to welcome you all to this space for our discussion, Let Them Know, Advancing Adolescent and Youth Sexual Reproductive Health Through Youth-Led Partnerships and Collaboration. My name is Jordan Freeman. I am a program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population and Reproductive Health at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. And I will be your moderator for today for what I hope is an insightful and impactful and action-oriented conversation. As the host of today's conversation as Gates Institute, we are delighted to invite you here. We are partnering with the Global Roadmap for Action through one of our global programs in our new strategy that goes through 2030. Through this new strategy, we are interested in cultivating the next generation of family planning leaders through mentorship, through training, and through networking opportunities. And so that's what we hope to achieve here today. As we gather here today, we've come with a shared commitment and purpose to highlight the challenges and issues facing adolescents and youth in family planning and sexual reproductive health around the world. But this is not just a conversation, this is a call to action. It's a call to action that comes to place at a time where we are reevaluating and looking at our global efforts to advancing adolescents and youth sexual reproductive health, especially as we're looking at our 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and benchmarks. And one of the groups leading this call to action is the AYSRHR Global Roadmap for Action, which I am super excited to have here today. This is a growing global coalition of youth-led organizations that are driving a youth-led and youth-designed vision for their sexual and reproductive health. So I invite you all to ask questions and engage in this conversation. As we engage in this conversation, I ask that you come with an open mind, a collaborative spirit, and a commitment to action, action-oriented. That's going to be the whole theme for today. Although I am your moderator, this is an open space for discussion. I encourage you to ask each other questions, to challenge each other, and to seek collaboration and solutions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce everyone that's here today. Starting with my right, I have Dr. Jacqueline Fonkwo, who is a member of the Global Roadmap for Action and also an AYSRHR consultant with FP2030. I have Dr. Samukeliso Dube, the Executive Director for FP2030. I have Innocent Grant, who is also a member of the Roadmap for Action, as well as the Program Director for Young and Alive based in Tanzania. I have Danielle Engel, the Technical Specialist and Team Lead for Adolescents and Youth at UNFPA. I have Imbago, Dr. David Imbago, I apologize, who is the Director for UNFPA. And then I have Dr. Norhan Bader, who is a member of the core leadership team at the Global Roadmap for Action and has been through it the entire time, pushing this vision forward. So with that said, I'm going to kick off our conversation. And so my first question that I want to ask to all of us and kind of set the stage, get us warmed up and talking, is what brings you to this conversation and what do you hope to get out of this conversation? So lucky you, Jackie. You were to my right, so I am going to start with you.
Thank you, Jordan. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited for this discussion because many a times we find ourselves seated, we are attending and participating in discussions and panels, and we are not really moving from discussions to actions. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited that this particular discussion is not just about dialogue, but it's dialogue that is leading to action. And how did I find myself in this space? I think in 2017, when I graduated from med school, I was practicing in a clinical setting in a small community that was plagued by a humanitarian crisis. And while I was in the hospital setting, I saw that it was becoming more common to find a teenager, 15-year-old young lady who moves into the health facility and is seeking for care, maybe from an incomplete abortion with her life at stake, or a young girl of 16 years old who comes to the clinic and is presenting with signs of an emergency because maybe they attempted an abortion with the wrong people in their neighborhoods, and she's coming and she's presenting with a grave complication because she has been bleeding excessively. And so I started asking myself, well, what is going on? Because through my medical training, I was really not exposed to what happens at a community level that impacts people's health, especially the health of young girls. And so I realized at the time at which they are coming, there's very little that I could do. And so we started doing some activities within the community to find out what was happening, who was perpetuating this, and why are young girls more and more vulnerable. And so one thing led to the other. I saw the reason to do more in the community, and so eventually transitioned out into public health practice. And I'm really looking forward to today to see how do we connect the different things that are happening in small communities across the globe, because our problems are becoming common, right? What was happening in my small community where I was when we look at what's happening in Ukraine now, they're identical. And so though communities are unique in themselves, but their problems are similar. And when I started participating in global conferences and discussing with youth leaders, I could realize that we have solutions to bring, but we are disconnected. And so I'm excited because the opportunity of what the GRA wants to do is to connect this organization. I'm looking forward to, now that the platform has already been set, what is it that we can do? And today, being at UNGA 78, which is a very pivotal time, and we're looking at being midway into the SDGs, what can we do differently so that by the time we arrive in 2030, we are celebrating that we have done it despite the challenges. So excited and looking forward to the action that we are going to be taking from today going forward.
Okay, thank you. It's a hard act to follow. All right. Dr. Samu. I know, I'm sorry.
So I am here because we're leading an organization, FP2030, and collaborating with Johns Hopkins Institute. We know that we are solving not just common problems, Jackie, but complex problems. And complex problems require that we collaborate and we become not only inclusive, but we become intentional and deliberate around who is around the room and who is on the table. I believe that we ought to, because we haven't done this in the past, I believe that when something is not being solved, right, you need to question yourself, like, who else could come in with a fresher perspective, with maybe some agility, some pragmatism, and I believe that young people are the key to that. You know, Jordan, when we started way back, I think around 2010, McKinsey released a report that was Lions on the Move. You know, it was about Africa, you know, like, you know, I was walking tall for the Africa we wanted. You know, I was like, these are not only frontier markets, now we're talking about emerging markets. We were hopeful. We wanted to do more. But you know what we did? We left the youth behind and we didn't achieve much. I know, and we are convinced within FP2030 and in my heart, that we cannot get to the future that we want, whether it's around SDGs, whether it's around Africa 2063, whether it's about the agenda that is FP2030. We've just refreshed our strategy. And there is a pillar that speaks to youth. It's about ensuring that young people are not only involved, because we like including them, and they are not only beneficiaries, but they are leading in terms of the solutions to these complex problems. Just a week ago, I was counting this year, I've had like close nieces, nephews, etc., who are like, who just, you know, their lives suddenly take a certain turn because they don't have access to sexual and reproductive health. And this is also personal, because I'm like, we are throwing away young people's futures because of restrictive policies, because we just choose not to include them, because we think that we know better than them. Instead of bringing them in the room and around the table, we are saying that we know better than them. This is the time. And I'm just grateful for GRA for creating this platform, because this is a platform for action. So I'm looking forward to deliberations today to say, what is that action?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it's my time. Looks like I had to follow conversation as well. Yeah, I think to me, it's for so many years there have been a number of guidelines and strategies to solve complex challenges, as Dr. Sam said, complex sexual and reproductive health challenges which are going on in different contexts. And then for somehow these guidelines, these strategies, these programs are not delivering what we actually expecting to see. So we see still there is a continuity of complex problems. You know, when I was in Tanzania this year at home, and then the Minister of Health was announcing the new rates of teenage pregnancy in the country, I was like, looks like we are going back. We are not doing any progress, despite the hard work that we've been doing. And like, maybe we are not doing anything good. So I think this is a platform that now brings together us young people who are doing, you know, programs in the communities, and FP2030 and UNFPA from the global levels, to co-create together and see how can we create responsive solutions. So I think this, what brings me here is because I see this as a safe space and a brave space to start thinking about what went wrong and how do we improve it and start doing actions. So I'm actually looking forward to that. As you say, it's an action-oriented conversation. I think it's going to be a really strong way to start kicking afresh and improve the programs we do. So that's it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, well, it's my privilege to represent UNFPA, the Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency of the UN. But apart from being the Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, we are also one of the agencies which really looks towards young people. We really want to be a place where young people can come, and we have, I just talked to my colleague here that this morning, during this Imbago, we are hosting the Youth Plus in UNFPA, so all young people coming together, come to our premises, and that's really what we want to see. We are also, I'm working at the technical division in UNFPA, and we are the ones who contribute and help develop these guidelines, which you're talking about. And and we very much would like these guidelines to be informed by the lived realities of young people. So that's why in all our country offices, in all our regional offices, in the headquarters here, we are in a constant exchange with young people to make sure that what is in these guidelines and what we recommend to countries actually is informed by the realities of young people and is co-designed. And I hope that this space, and that's why we are so very comfortable here, is a great space to co-design, to think about how can we move advanced ASFH, the SFH for young people. I hope that it's not as bleak as you say. I hope we come to some of the points where we see that we have done a lot of have seen a lot of advances in SFHR for young people. Some indicators are going to the right direction, so we should not lose hope and not lose the energy to move forward. But again, as I said before, we would really like very much to do this with and for young people and create a coalition together with you to advance the goals of the ICPD, which is SFHR for everyone.
Thank you. David?
First, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I am very, very honored to be with colleagues that I've known for a while now and also be with leading agencies in the field of family planning and SRHR. I think that is fantastic, and also with the Johns Hopkins Institute for coordinating this and leading this as well, co-leading this as well. From my side, I think at the YILHAB we are very interested in the topic of youth participation in the field of AYSRHR, of adolescent and youth SRHR. So the GRA, for example, has a major component on meaningful youth engagement. So for us, when we realized that there was this connection and this opportunity, we said, yes, this seems like a good chance to get the message out of why this matters, but not only why this matters as a message, because we have many advocacy platforms already. We have had consensus statements launched already, but something that was more practical, that had like concrete steps that we could follow, not only as youth organizations, but also as implementers, as funders, as researchers, as everyone who is involved in the field. Because from our side, what we have noticed is that just working in silos doesn't work at all. So as you were saying before, co-creation matters and is very, very important. What we say at the YILHAB is collaborative action learning. So it means that all of us get together in one space to learn together what is working, what is not working, and get perspectives from each other, right? Because we know what, for example, the funder knows how financing is done in general, where the funds are coming from, then the implementers know what is needed, then the researchers know the measurement of each of these things. So we all have to get together into this, like roll out of sleeves and get beyond this just advocacy asks and these, like demands in general, because we all have demands. We all love to make these sort of, like position papers, requests, high-level things, which is fantastic, and I'm not saying that they are not necessary, but I think that we need to go beyond that into actually working and saying, okay, this needs to be done now, because in the end, like we're saying, there's been some backlash, in general when it comes to rights. There's been decreases when it comes to achievements that we had in the past. So I think that is a major red flag that we need to take a look and just get together and start working from now on.
Thank you. Norhan?
I'm excited, first of all, to be here. Like, it's really amazing to see how the GRA moves around the 2 years from just being an idea and then collecting more young youth-led organization, coming together, presenting it at the ICFP, and being here also to have more discussion about it and making more a live document and more partnership. You put me in a very reflective mood, Jackie. I think now about the 16 years old me, trying to do something for my community, and then I came across women trying to have a birth while she have an HIV. And from there, I felt at some point trying to be alone, trying to solve a problem by myself, very complex problem. I didn't understand system, I didn't understand anything around what's happening around me. I just wanted to help. And it's really amazing when I be in a global events and conference, and I felt like I'm not alone. There is a lot of millions and billions and of young people that they want to help and support, coming from a country that is around now 100 million, 60% of us are young people, seeing what's happening in Egypt back in 2011 revolution, and how also we are frustrated and we want to change the situation, very complex situation. We have a lot of energy, ambitious, but I feel also how the youth movement sometimes is fragmented and sometimes it's really hard to be organized. Like, I'm amazed that the Global Roadmap of Action have 40 youth-led organization, and I know how it's really hard to have a youth-led organization in any of our own countries. The registration process, the opening a bank, there is no kind of mentorship, funding issues. It's a lot of hectic work. So I'm excited to be able to have this moment where all of us came in a solidarity, trying to see what's the future. And I agree with you with the right movement coming into rise. I guess if we are not organized to be a strong opposition of what's happening now, it's going to be, I don't want to imagine it. Like, I'm imagining the optimistic part of it. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to more action, more also commitment to the GRA, to all youth-led organizations that been there, and they're also members and all the community that they work in.
Wonderful, thank you. So what I'm hearing is action-oriented, which I love to hear. I'm also hearing interest in collaboration, which is why we're all here, but also urgency. There's an urgency to come together and to find the solutions together, which I love. So we talked a little bit, and people have touched on these complex problems and challenges. Let's name them. What are these complex challenges that we're facing in terms of advancing ARSRHR, especially when it comes to partnering and working with and engaging with youth-led organizations or youth in general? So I'm going to open that to the floor if anyone wants to take it first. Otherwise, I'll call on someone.
I can start.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I think it was in 2019 that the YIELD project report was launched, when it was a research that documented most of the issues that young people face when they try to engage in the field of SRHR. And the way that the report divided the issues were in 5 main categories. So first is finding the youth who is leading right now the SRHR field. So to explain this a bit is that often the same people are the ones who are representing the different initiatives. The young people who are involved in the field of SRHR often come from privileged backgrounds, for example, capital, speaking second language as English, for example, and I am including myself in there. I am pretty much aware of my privilege and I acknowledge them all the time, but it's an issue. It's an issue that we're trying to change right now, for example. The second one is equipment. So this is linked to capacity building, for example, allowing the young people to have the resources that they need when it comes to knowledge, skills that they can develop in the time that they are involved in the field of SRHR. Then it comes to enable, which is making room. You know, we always talk about the chairs, the table, bring the folding table. Yeah, it's a lot of examples that I can give. But it's also like the adults who, for lack of a better term, because I always struggle with that youth adult. I mean, I'm an adult. We're all adults since we're 18. But also for them to make room and make the space that is, you know, like very much not hostile or like even unsafe, for example, for young people to engage. And then connecting, because what happens after you turn 24, 30, 35, 40, whatever the definition of youth is. So it's also about thinking about this next step. You know, are you joining the workforce? Or are you moving to something different? What are we doing with you to stay involved in the field? Because otherwise you're just losing people with fantastic, you know, knowledge, skills, who have been trained for several years. And then finally, tracking, which is the measurement aspect of this, because we all have our youth initiatives, we all have frameworks that we want to develop, but there's lack of harmony when it comes to measuring and tracking and all these indicators. I think that we need to make the case of youth participation, but we need to make this together as well. So we have a united case, investment case when it comes to youth partnership, instead of fragmenting, like Norhan mentioned, that the field is still fragmented. So I can stop for now, yeah.
Wonderful. Anyone want to add, build?
Yes, I can just say from our perspective, I mean, if you look at challenges, you just have to look at the data, unfortunately. I mean, 21 million births happen every year in adolescence. 10 million of those are mostly unintended, and you know, we have over 5 million abortion in adolescence every year. So that's, of course, a huge red flag and a reason for concern. And although we see that, you know, there is increased commitment on the policy level for ASOH, for adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, we still see often a gap between the policy intent and what actually programs are delivering for adolescents on the ground. And there it comes, you know, we're involving young people here at the global level, you know, even at the country level, at the national level. But then when young people come to a service provider, they're still not being treated, you know, the way they should be. There was still a lot of stigma, which young people and structural issues which they have to overcome. So, additionally, I think you mentioned it, David. We see this rollback of some of the gains which we have seen in the last decades on gender equality, on rights. And ASOH is, I think, particularly sensitive because, you know, adolescent sexuality is a contested field, more or less everywhere in the world. So we still have to overcome these barriers for young people. And, you know, so that's what I would highlight as the main challenges we see for the moment.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other
Could I just build
Of
on the issue of data? Because we want data. Now we have moved from, is it data informed, like data driven, right? Data driven decision making that is localized. I think we still don't have that. Often we get the macro picture, and the data that usually is useful is what happens in Tanzania, what happens in Cameroon, and that data actually could, if you put it in front of policy and decision makers, often they act when they see data. So how we collect data when some of the family planning modules actually exclude adolescents is a problem. And that points to the point that you made earlier around restrictive policies, and we are sort of almost not as organized as the opposition, because we can't name this problem, we can't put it on the table, then we can't solve it. But the opposition, which has been working for the past 50 years to get where they are now, they named whatever they wanted to change, and they are consistently like nibbling at that issue. I think, and again, I'm not in a solutions mode, but because we have not characterized this problem clearly and succinctly, we can't solve it. We just react to, can you believe they did this? Can you believe they did this? And that, for me, remains a challenge. You mentioned the organizational issues around funding, etc., that actually become a problem. And part of it stems from the inability to do cross-collaboration between youth in education, youth in climate change, youth in other areas. So we become like fragmented, and it becomes a challenge. So again, we may need to reorganize our agenda around and cross-collaborate so that we can access sustainable and maybe predictable funding, because that the challenge is that it just comes in pieces and dribs. And I'm hoping GRA could help us even just move that needle a bit.
You said you weren't in a solutions mode, but that sounded like a solution.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to chime in. I hesitated. I wanted others to take the lead because I wanted to come from a different angle, which is that of what I find to be a great challenge we are facing now is that we have been identifying this problem of how we are lagging behind, how we are delivering for young people. And what I feel that organizations are doing now is that they are getting better at communicating and learning the language. What is the language that you can use in the global scene that can make you to fit in? What is it that you can put on your website that people can look and say, oh, this organization is delivering for young people? And so it seems we are becoming experts at using the right word. Oh, we've moved from youth participation, we've gone to meaningful youth engagement. Now we're talking about youth partnerships, and everyone is learning what's the language, because we don't want to be called out. And so you have global organizations that are solving youth problems from the fact of that they want their reputation to be maintained. They don't want to be called out, because there's that risk that if young people come after an organization, that maybe it can go a long way to affect how they are seen globally. And we know that has happened to some organizations. But that is problematic. If we are seeing delivering for young people, like we want to do it because we don't want to be called out, and we are learning the language and we're showing up and we're saying these things and we don't mean them. And it's still the same struggle. You still have to convince people a lot and still have to present that, okay, maybe this is what is needed. So I feel that one of the great challenges that we are facing now is that we've spoken a lot about these problems, and now we are just learning the language, what is best to say during what occasion, and we would really have to sit down and ask, when an organization makes a commitment to deliver for young people, do they mean it? And how can we tell whether they mean it or they are just bluffing? So I find that to be a big challenge, and I want to stop at that for now.
Okay, that sounds like accountability. It sounds similar, thread between you and Danielle's statements. It sounds like accountability for doing what you actually said you were going to do. And so how do we develop that? It's a question I'll leave in the air for now, but Innocent, go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to think on how to put this challenge out there, because I think most of the sexual and reproductive health challenges are quite known. So teenage pregnancy, high rates of HIV/AIDS transmission. But also I was trying to think of the challenges on how we approach these problems. I think one of the big challenges that I see now is we implementers, global partners, local partners, we are continuously start to lose trust in the communities we work with. And I think this trust this loss of trust is not just being created by us, but it's also how those global anti-rights movements have been coming up into disrupting that kind of trust that we've been working to build with the communities. And I think that loss of trust is making even the work that we do sometimes to be tough to do and not to be taken by the communities that we work with. I think the big challenge now is, what are the trust building platforms that we're going to use? What are the trust building pathways that we're going to use to make sure that the approach we co-create with the communities are actually working and actually taken by the communities and being implemented? So maybe somewhere else, somehow we lost that. Maybe we didn't work with religious leaders. Maybe we didn't work with some other groups that are actually helping in building those trust within the communities. So one thing I learned, for instance, this year in my country, there was quite a big anti-organizations movement, if that's how we call it. So any organization working on sexual and reproductive health, an organization working on HIV/AIDS response, we're being seen as threats. We're being seen as going against Tanzanian values and cultures. But for instance, in the communities we worked with, was the trust that we built between our organizations and the communities that helped to say, no, we know Young and Alive, they're doing this work and we love the work that they're doing. So how do we keep on amplifying that trust for the communities to say, we know these colleagues, we have been co-creating these solutions together and it's actually working. So yeah, I think that's one of the challenges I see. We are losing trust with the communities, we are losing trust with the governments. Nowadays, if I'm to implement a program in my communities, I have to go through millions of approvals before starting an actual work, and it's just delaying the interventions, it's delaying everything. And those people who are working against us, they really know us and they know how to manipulate communities in terms of denying what's right that we are doing in the communities. So yeah, maybe as we move forward, let's challenge ourselves and see what are the trust building mechanisms to maintain the trust of the communities, to maintain the impact that we are doing in the communities, and see the communities keep taking the work that we are doing as solutions, and to see it actually working. Yeah.
Thank you. So this conversation is action oriented, so I'm not going to keep us in the challenges too long. But we've named some of these challenges. We've started to put them on the table. Let's identify and be transparent with what they are. So my question to you all now is, what are some of the opportunities? What are the achievements and opportunities that you've seen through your organization and your work in AYSRHR that we can leverage and build upon, and let's kind of co-create some of these solutions together?
Can I just build on what
please.
Innocent
Yes,
was saying? Because I like the issue of trust. And for me, I am seeing an increase in part of the reason why I almost came late here. I saw, the Burmese people were demonstrating around, against the government, etc. I think all over the world, there is this shrinking of the democratic space overall. So it's not just SRHR, it's just like the democratic spaces. And maybe what we need to do is to be aware that, closing, the issue of rights, SRHR is perhaps even a proxy of what is happening in the broader democratic spaces from the countries where we live. Because you see that that's not spared. So they will close organizations that are working on SRHR, then next, and then we think we are safe. First they will start maybe with LGBTQI, then they will go to family planning, then they will go to HIV, then they will go to gender issues, then they will go. It's always like nibbling into these democratic spaces of anything, and then they retain power. We know fully well that this is becoming a very complex problem, and that's why I believe one of the things that we should do as organizations is cross-collaboration. We can't just live in a bubble. Like we need to understand what's happening within PEPFAR right now. We need to understand what's happening in good governance circles, because when there's good governance, you actually make sure that rights are exercised. What is happening even in other parts of the world, we can not stay in a bubble and stay naive. That's one thing that I think we should be doing. So organizations also need to be deliberate. Jackie is talking about not window dressing. Jackie took me through the ladder. What do you call the ladder? Which is the ladder of participation. Now I've learned that. We are trying to get to number 8. I don't know, the stage 8 of that ladder. So that it's not just like participation, it's leadership. And youth are not seen as beneficiaries. They are seen, they actually co-create, they lead and say, this is a challenge that we are going to solve. So now increasingly organizations need to be measured, and we need accountability mechanisms, including even FP2030. Yes, we have put them in our governing board. Yes, they were part of the transition of oversight committees, etc. Yes, we've got focal points in structures in countries. Yes, maybe we do give them a stipend here and there, but is that enough? Perhaps not, and we need those accountability mechanisms and name each other and call each other out when things are not going well. Otherwise, we too are closing that democratic space around sexual health and reproductive rights.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had something to add. I saw some snaps on that side of the room. Lovely. Did you have something to add?
No, I wanted to go to the achievements and moving us to a little bit of a more positive, forward-looking perspective on adolescent sexual reproductive health and rights. Even though I fully subscribe to your analysis of trust, and actually this morning at the UN we had a whole session with young people where the first session was about trust and intergenerational partnership, and what does that look like in the very complex world we are living in. But pivoting back to what are the advancements we have seen in ASRH, I would like, if you allow me, as we are at the brink of celebrating the ICPD at 30, just looking back at the International Conference on Population Development, which has really been pivotal, I would say, to put adolescent SRHR on the map. That is quite, forward-looking, quite, progressive for its time, like 30 years ago. So I think we can look back and say, well, we have come quite a long way. Again, if we look at the indicators, we have seen, improvements in indicators for adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, including improved maternal health, a drop in adolescent fertility rates, a drop in child marriage, even though it's still very prevalent. But if we look at the trends, they do go into the right direction. and also an increase for demand of contraceptives. And again, we are not there yet, but if we're looking at the trends, they're going to the right direction. The question is, how can we accelerate that progress? And then we also see some really encouraging signs in some countries who have been able to push multi-sectoral programs to reduce teenage pregnancies. Thinking about Chile, Uruguay, an excellent example, all from your region, but also Ethiopia, or even a country like England, who was really able to, in a short period of time, to move the needle. And that shows that we know what works. We know how we can work together. If we push multi-sectoral approaches, if we take young people on the journey, we will be able to really make real progress, which will have an impact in young people's lives. So I'm quite hopeful that if we all bundle together, we really can make a big difference.
Thank you. Other opportunities that you all see based on the challenges we've discussed and based on your own experience and work?
I can say that the GRA is an opportunity. Yeah, it's an opportunity because if we are saying that there is a lot of fragmentation between youth-led organizations, so 41 or 40 more than youth-led organizations were able to cross over the 2 years, trying a lot of consultation, thematic consultation, regional consultation, survey filling and writing and rewriting. And away from the section that related to the barrier, we were able to name the priorities. And it's really important when we name the priorities that we want to work with. Everyone in their own country, whatever it was on a community level, global level, can use the document and try to work around the priorities. And the priorities is the other way of all barriers that we're mentioning. Like one of the priorities acknowledging how young people and youth are a diverse group, and solutions does not mean has to be very specific for the context, for the diversity of identities and the needs that young people need. And then also, because also there is a huge need for the progressive SRHR and justice policies, given that they're also turning out of those policies and having every now and then some laws or some policies that do an opposite of the old success and the steps that we take more forward. And then also the financing, it was a huge issue. Youth-led organization need this also trust to be able to be financed. And I agree with you, Anis, and it's not only like I feel like we lost also some of those trust because donors sometimes driven certain themes that we have to deliver to our community, and they don't perceive it as an issue. So it's like, why you are talking to me about 1, 2, 3 while I need, for example, economic empowerment. So also donors have to listen, also not only financing, but also listen what are the needs in those communities to be able to fund it. And again, yes, of course, meaningful use participation. And the last one is about data and transparent data, accessible data, the language of data, who own it, who produce it also sometimes is a little bit critical, and also a huge part relating to monitoring and evaluation and accountabilities, because also we need to know what are the success and what are the failures to be able to learn from this. So those were the 5 priorities that we were able to come across, and I guess also we came with 3 pathways. I guess Innocent can explore more about also the pathways that we created. We're trying to also be organized in advocacy for the 3 pathways that we created.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Nora. I think the GRA is one of the big opportunity as we are starting moving forward these conversations, and also just building on the pathways, the partnership pathways with the GRA. So we've got 3 partnership pathways. The first one is about power shifting, and if I'm to explain it in a simple way, I think it's about moving the language from this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want, but it's moving from that language to how can we co-create what is being wanted together. So that's about power shifting and acknowledging the power that young people are having and being able to work together in co-creating solutions. It's what we've already been talking about. So it's already in the GRA. The second pathway is about youth leadership. So as we are moving forward to solve these complex sexual reproductive health challenges, but also acknowledging the the progress that we've been able to make. But it's also understanding that the work that we do is about changing people's hearts and minds. And changing people's hearts and minds needs a lot of leadership within it. And young people are the leaders to do this. The GRA gives an opportunity for us to recognize that, you know, we have leaders, and let's go and acknowledge their leadership potential, and actually being able to mentor them to become good leaders and do and bring change within their own communities. And the last pathway is about accountability. So 40 youth-led organizations also understand the power and the importance of having more transparency and how do we make leaders accountable in terms of the results that we want to achieve. And this is actually already been taken into action. Whenever I speak about these pathways, I normally tend to reflect on what maybe has been done in Tanzania. So for instance, I want to acknowledge young leaders in Makete district of Tanzania who are doing intergenerational community dialogues to challenge perceptions, norms of what is hindering their access to sexually reproductive health information, family planning services within the healthcare centers in Tanzania. They're already doing it themselves within their own communities, identifying the challenges and speaking to the local leaders about how do we change these complex challenges which are happening, acknowledging a group of young mothers in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, who are working to empower each other, talking to each other, what are the needs that we have, you know. I remember when we went to this group of young mothers, like, okay, we want to solve sexually reproductive health challenge, we want to know your challenge, but they're like, no, these are not maybe our challenges, we want money first, we want food first. And they working by their own selves to identify these issues and co-creating solutions to resolve them. So the GRA is already in action. I think it's now time to take these partnership pathways, working together and see how do we implement them together. I see that's already an opportunity. How do we maintain that group of young mothers in Dar es Salaam? How do we maintain that group of adolescent girls and young women and girls and adolescent boys and men in Makete district who are actually leading community dialogues to change perceptions? They already have trust, you know, they're doing some stuff in the community which are actually promising. So how do we move forward with that collectively?
Jordan, can I chime in? Just again, building on this conversation around linkages with other sectors, but this is not just a sector. It's like, what is it that a young person wants? Because what we're trying to do here is to program hope, right? The hope for a better future, hope, you know, that when I want to have children, I will be able to decide, hope for a job at times, hope for better education and advancement. So linking that is important. And I am seeing there are many initiatives that are trying to bridge the divide. Perhaps it's a false dichotomy between sexual reproductive health and economic empowerment and education, etc. So the more we link up, what we are doing with opportunities for youth around economic power for young people, that for me would actually be a win. And let's do that creatively. We trust youth, and we do hope that they will help us move the dial around funding for young people. I already like what is happening within Johns Hopkins and TCI, around working with sub-national governments to sort of scale some of these high impact practices, of which some of it is about working with young people. So if we actually accelerate that, that would really be great. Young people should know where money is. Somehow I was schooled to believe that there's so much money in the world. But it's chasing problems that are not necessarily the problems, right? We need to just direct the money to where the challenges are so that, youth have got access to that money. We're smart enough to actually do that. Get private capital, get private sector to work with you so that they have access to these opportunities. And lastly, we are launching as FP2030, we called it previously a rapid response mechanism, but a small grants mechanisms that actually would target advocacy, would work with young people to make sure that they've got resources to win at a local level, at a community level. So all these initiatives, let's map them and let's link up our youth with these opportunities to win.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, yes.
Yeah. So we're talking about opportunities, and I heard a lot about working together, also being action-oriented, co-creating together. And for example, at the Yield Hub, that's exactly what we're proposing through the collaborative action learning groups model. So it is a model where, like I said before, we need to get together all the stakeholders, for example, funders, implementers, advocates, researchers, implementers, innovators, everyone who can get their input into a specific problem that we propose for solution. So for example, what we do at the Yield Hub is facilitate the process. So we ask them a group, which is a commitment first because it's a long process. For example, FP2030 is part of our action learning group actually. So it's actually to roll up your sleeves and say, we're going to get to work. On top of all the work that we already have, we're going to do something else. We're going to challenge ourselves to find a solution for our organization, which is a small problem, big problem, but it's a problem that we need to solve when it comes to youth participation in the field of SRHR. And we only facilitate the process. We only structure the meetings in a way that is reflective. You have your learning diaries, you have your homework to do because it is like a classroom basically. But it's something that you will need to commit that you will do in 6 months because you will have to find a solution and implement the solution to this problem. So it's action oriented as much as possible in this case because you will be accountable for yourself because we are not a global thing, we're not the UN, we are not a government. We'll not be checking your grades, but you will know if you did your homework or you didn't do your homework. So for example, like you were saying before, I don't know, FP2030 doesn't know how to compensate young people beyond stipends, for example. Someone in the group might have a solution, might have an idea that can be proposed, but you know how FP2030 works. So you know if it will be feasible or not feasible to implement this. And I think this applies also to other issues in SRHR. For example, when it comes to data, when it comes to service provision, each of us know what works in our organization, our clinic, our hospital, our institute. There are toolkits out there. There are several toolkits out there. Probably there are hundreds being created right now as we speak. But in the end, it's a matter of you taking that toolkit and saying, okay, I'm going to apply this for a problem that is happening in my organization, and I'm going to do something about it. So I think that from our side, that's what we're proposing, and we're very happy that we have as much as local organization involved, but also big organizations like FP2030, like Plan International, Gender Health, big ones who are interested in these topics and are ready to make changes.
Thank you. Anything else anyone want to add around or build or make connections for some of the opportunities we've talked about?
Perhaps what I can say is I've been working in adolescent SRHR now for the last 20 years. And I have to say I think it's undeniable that in the last couple of years there has been increased attention at the global and even also at the national level, depending on the countries, on SRHR for adolescents. And that led to a couple of FP2020 as a good example, Girls No Brides pushing for ending child marriage, all these partnerships which are really the African Coalition on Menstrual Health, for instance. All those coalitions are really putting ASRH on the table. And that creates a lot of opportunity to speak about the issues, to advocate, but also to guide governments and implementation. The second point which I would like to say is policies and legal frameworks which are changing. So we see that, again, child marriage is a good example. FGM is another example where we see increasingly countries taking this up and putting legal frameworks in place which are protecting young people's sexual and reproductive health and rights. And again, guidelines. A couple of years back, WHO came out for the first time with guidelines on adolescent health, requested by the World Health Assembly. So, and that of course creates, it's not a panacea, and I agree with you to your earlier point, but it does create an opportunity to work with governments, have agencies like ours guide, advise governments to increase their focus on adolescents and youth SRHR. And then my last point is youth participation. You are here as the Global Roadmap for Action, a good example of what, the fact that we're having this discussion here at the UNGA, and by the way, it's not the only one, and David knows that, this week, where we talk about SRHR of adolescents. So that itself creates a huge opportunity to get your voices heard, have a platform where leaders will listen, and where we can table these issues, which then hopefully will have a trickle-down effect, so that we can have sustained change at the country level.
I say one more thing? Yeah, as much as we talk about opportunities also, I closed my notebook and I also remember the 1.8 billion campaign because it's a 1.8 young people for change campaign, which reflects on the population that exists right now, which is 1.8 young people in the world. And I think that this is a good framework for us to think that the amount of people who benefit from these adolescent and youth SRHR initiatives that we're talking about, and also who are struggling with the problems that we're also talking about, is huge. And it will be growing in the next few years to a point where I think that more participation matters a lot. And for example, this morning I was also listening to a parliamentarian speaking about the lack of political participation of young people, for example. And when I reflected on this 1.8 billion people not being represented in policy-making spaces, for example, it is like completely unfair in the end. It's lack of justice that we're talking about. So yeah, I was just remembering also that the Global Forum for Adolescents taking place this year. It also has a huge SRHR component because it matters a lot for young people. So yeah, just good to amplify other activities happening.
Thank you.
Jordan, a thing I'm conscious about is inclusivity as we are doing the 1.8 billion, as we are talking about these guidelines and policies, because often who is excluded? It's these teenage mothers who now have children and they're in underserved areas in Tanzania, in Malawi, etc., in Pakistan, because often we exclude them. Is there a way, since we're data people and we've got UNFPA in the room, so I'm safe. Is there a way of sort of getting some coefficients of inclusion? Because we're almost starting a new, we're accelerating. Here we are putting enzymes and catalysts, right, to say we are not going to achieve some of the targets towards SDGs if we don't do something different. But what are we tracking? Are we tracking those people in the rural areas, you know, the ones where the community is taboo? It's known that the only way you have to just get married at 15 and that's it. And how do we make sure that a country, as they're implementing their guidelines, they measure this? They measure some of the equity, they are measured in how they are successful in addressing some of the inequities of the past. Because I think if we leave that behind, we will leave a whole number of people behind. I'm not even talking about the struggle within the struggle, right? Youth with living with disabilities, you know, the other sexual minorities, etc., in the whole sexual and reproductive health agenda. So could we measure this? I think we've got smart people who could help us, because when you start measuring it, it starts getting done.
Yep.
John, just one word, talking about the opportunities that we see. I think, build on what Danielle said and what both of them have said, is that we are seeing more and more recognition of what youth leadership can do. Mm-hmm. And so we are having more youth-led initiatives that are becoming established organizations, which I think is great. Innocent will bear with me that, will agree with me that when you are working in the context of a youth-led organization, that you're pushed to your extremes to develop a lot of capacity. Mm-hmm. He might be an expert in designing interventions, but at the same time you need to master how finances work. At the same time you need to master how to work with people in government to get the authorizations and make sure that you're aligning your programs to what the policy, national policy or district policies say. So what are we doing at the end of the day? If we're having more and more of these youth-led organizations that are established, and we have youth leaders whose capacities, they are building their capacities. These are people who the next 5 years, next 10 years from now, Innocent here is a potential minister of health for his country, or a president for those who have political ambitions. So, and when these are people who would occupy, who would grow and would occupy other senior positions in the country. And if there are people who started working where they could use minimal resources to achieve more. Mm-hmm. So we are thinking about a future where these people will become now decision leaders in their countries, and they are deciding what policy should we go. So when we talk about youth leadership, we are talking about the present, but the future that we desire to see, and these are the right people that we're investing in. And I'm glad that organizations and partners are beginning to see the need to fund the work of young people. It's not a threat, it should not be a competition, it should not just be tokenism, but because of this great opportunity, everybody should be vying and running for this and supporting this. And I'm glad that we are going to be doing that from this discussion.
Yes, that leads me to a good segue. So part of the Roadmap for Action, their tagline is let them know. Let them know what youth expect, what we want, and what we need. So, from the Roadmap for Action Youth in the Room, you have FP2030 and UNFPA. So I'm going to give you the floor to let them know what you want.
Just going to respond and say, come to us, talk to us. UNFPA's strategic plan, which we are implementing right now, has as one objective to support women-led and youth-led organizations. And we realize that UN is not always the easiest to work with. We have big bureaucracy, etc. But we are changing our policies so that we are more agile in supporting grassroots organizations, particularly youth-led organizations. We understand that there is turnover, people move in and out of the youth space, obviously, and that requires capacity building, etc., and that our audit requirements need to be different when we work with young people. So there is a lot of change happening on that front. That's what I can say. And definitely UNFPA is one of the agencies who is really committed to make this work. So my point is, come talk to us, talk to me, talk to us here at headquarters, talk to our country offices. We really are very eager to support the civil society, the youth-led civil society, women's-led civil society, which often is young women-led. Let's put this also out there. So we're very happy to work with you and build capacities and see how we can, increase. Also to address your point of the civic space. I think that's a role the UN needs to play as well, where we, create the right environment where the civil society can thrive. And for us, UNFPA, it means, women's organization and youth organizations. So we're really your ally here. So please talk to us.
Yeah, Danielle, we are really, really excited. This is why we are having this conversation, to have this action. And we want to assure you that the GRA is not an organization that is a threat to established institutions like UNFPA, but it's a partner. It's reaching out, that there's so much that we can do together. And just to let you know that we cherish that, and we want to work and partner with UNFPA, and to let you know that tapping into this moment is a great opportunity to let other partners who are of the same capacity of you or of different capacities to know that this is a great thing. It's a great moment that we all should be keen in. It's time for us to do action, and so you're participating. We want to assure you that UNFPA is signing up for something great, for something big, and they are in the right place, doing the right thing with the right people, and that you should be proud of that, because not too long from now the results will be very evident, and you want to be one of those people. Like, we are the first guys who jumped on the board with these guys, and we are glad with the results that we achieved. So we will be coming. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. I guess for FP2030, there is two asks that I have in my mind while you were talking, and I guess post points you already touched on them. One of them, FP20, I'm a big fan of FP2030.
We need a commitment from Egypt.
No, yeah.
FP2030 commitment from
That's
Egypt.
why I want youth-led organization to be able to have, to be part of the accountability and monitoring. I know that you already have young people in all reference group and all of other, but also can we have a way of also young youth-led organization in those countries, reflecting also of the report that the country is presenting for FP2030 as a way of also counter kind of also validation, also from young people what they are needs for the country that is committed to FP2030 to be done. I think this one track will be good also to have youth-led organization in those countries be able to reflect to the commitment of their country, the reporting that they do as an accountability track. And I guess you mentioned the small grant mechanism, and I'm wondering how we can make it easy for youth-led organization to apply for this grant. What kind of requirement, what are the process to make it easy for youth-led organization to apply to small grant and be able also to participate to the movement that FP2030 is doing?
Yeah, and what you're talking about, your first point around youth, making sure that youth could participate in accountability, etc., that is on track. And some of the people who are doing the real work include Jackie here, because the commitments that we are seeing nearly half or more are actually now involving youth, like why we need adolescents and young people in the forefront. We need more. We almost want to make it mandatory, right? That a commitment should have young people, otherwise what are we doing? So that is one. So that is a commitment also to this initiative, to GRA, that we will participate in youth leadership development in the countries that make FP2030 commitment, where we can, offer, those spaces, ensure that they are involved in accountability. But the interesting thing is that for all the focal point structures at a country level, it's compulsory to have a youth person. So we are doing that. The challenge is that we may not be the ones who are choosing that. I recently came from a country where they were like, I don't understand why FP2030 it doesn't want this person who we have chosen. She's beautiful. She's pretty. Yeah, I was shocked. But anyway, so we may not necessarily be the ones, setting some of that criteria. Yeah.
Youth-led organization can be beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, but she was selected because she's very good. She's going to be pretty on a global stage. But the second thing around this RRM mechanism, so we are going to officially launch it, and we'll send some of these. And most of the work is going to be done at a regional hub level. As you know, the work that we've been doing over the past year is to decentralize FP2030's architecture to make sure that it's led at a country, closer to the country. So soon to be announced.
Any other? Yes. Oh. I don't know. Decide who wants to go first.
Yeah, I just want to build on Nora's question to FP2030. So for instance, I know one of the experience we had recently is the Minister of Health sent like a document for civil society organizations working on family planning to report on the FP commitment, progress and what they're doing. And then later we had a phone call from the National Family Planning Coordinator saying, oh, Young and Alive, amazing. You are the only youth organization who reported, da, 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 da. But again, to ask what is next after that, after celebrating, reporting these commitments, is there any influence that the UNFPA can do with the Ministry of Health in terms of uptaking interventions that they really loved? Because they'll just be, oh, thank you for filling these reports, we love it, but what's next? Yeah. And then the second question is, when are we going to start moving from small grants to big funding and sustainable grants to support these interventions? Especially sometimes I think, so for instance, how can we start getting funding to support strategic visions or strategic plans, not just small projects? Because I think, so working as a program director, one of my experiences, sometimes we just find ourselves working very hard, seeking for funding, and forget a component of what are we supposed to do in the communities, because we're just worried this fund is going to end. When am I going to get another fund? This fund is going to end. When am I going to get another grant? And we find ourselves lost somewhere else there. When are we going to start moving to that? So, as FP2030, also some youth organizations are having their strategic vision also 2030. How do you go together with these strategic visions? So as at least we, as implementers, and how at least we keep focus to implementing and start moving the focus to just seeking fund all the time. Sometimes it's just too much applications of funding, too much rejections, too much pressure to see this grant is going to end. How can I support? I know the FP2030 has some, in countries where it has commitment, for instance in Tanzania, it's very influential. Whenever we get into the family planning technical working groups, FP2030 will be mentioned like maybe 100 times by everyone, So it's very, very influential. How can we influence the Ministry of Health, these family planning technical working groups, to uptake interventions? I mean, sometimes the grants are not there, but how can they uptake and keep supporting interventions? Or how can we get long-term funding as well?
So can I just ask whether the technical working, so when you're talking about the funding, is it for the youth-led organizations, or are you also talking about the technical working groups' capacity to actually implement because they don't have funding, or is it both?
Maybe both, but much for the youth-led organizations.
Since we're in this room, right? Since we're in this room. So you are spot on, Innocent, around how, as FP2030, we could work better. First, to make sure that at a country level, you know, the FP2030 commitment has got buy-in from several partners. So that's step number one, including, by the way, UNFPA. It is my desire that we shouldn't have disparate things. So the FP2030 commitment should speak to the ICPD mechanisms so that we speak the same language and we are pushing from and singing from the same hymn book, because otherwise people have got this different reporting and we don't know what is happening. And it's easier when we know that for the family planning component, this is what the country is committed to. This is the costed implementation plan or the FP goals model. This is the youth component that they're trying to implement. And then we are all aware of what's happening at a country level. USAID has been very good in doing that. And it helps their implementing partners, momentum, etc., because they all reference the FP2030 commitment, because that's what the government, and in many countries, it's usually the president who launches this commitment because they are serious about the family planning agenda. So now, the next step is how do we then move from this commitment making, the reporting mechanism, to accountability? So what you're talking about is accountability. What should happen if you don't meet the targets? Or what happened because when you didn't meet your targets? Is it because of money? Is it because of technical expertise? What exactly? Then we would have more impetus to go back to UNFPA and sit down and lock the room and say we are not leaving until we solve this problem, right? Because that's not happening. You know, when we don't meet our goals, we should be accountable because we help the governments to actually make these goals. So I think we need to graduate and move towards our own accountability mechanisms, working with governments to say, if we didn't achieve this, what should we do if we didn't achieve those plans? I think there are some countries that are doing it better than others. Sierra Leone, for example, UNFPA, after last year, they sent a delegation of 20 experts to solve this problem. Let's solve this challenge that we didn't meet. We need to do that better, Innocent, and getting young people in the room would help us. Funding. Yeah. I think it's a starting point, but we don't want to stay there. We don't want to stay small grants. In 20 years, it's still small grants, right? We hope that when you've got access to these grant-making organization, Innocent Grant, is it Grant?
Yeah.
So if we get access to these, yes, exactly his name. We need to then graduate, just like if you are starting a company and you're selling your blazers, right? You get seed funding, and then you graduate to mezzanine funding, and then you graduate to whatever. Then you come to New York and you list your blazer company on New York Stock Exchange to raise money. So you also would graduate like that. I think we should apply the same thought process for youth organizations. So the seed funding is for specific issues that will get them to a better place in accessing bigger sums of money. I think we should be intentional about that, and that is important. And lastly, the issue of, there was something that you mentioned around, you will be in the room. I think for me, it's tied to the first response, that we need to work better at aligning commitments at a country level, at a global level even, and making sure that, we all sing from the same hymn book as a global community. Then it becomes easier for countries to do that. We'll do that better now that we've got the regional hubs and they are working with the country engagement teams to make sure that alignment occurs. It will be better if we work like that.
Yeah, the topic of funding for youth organizations has been around forever. I mean, since as long as I can recall, there's always a lack of core funding, lack of accessibility for grants, like you were saying, always applying for grants, and also this process has been complex most of the time. And as much as we're looking for commitments from FP2030 and UNFPA, we can also make a commitment ourselves. For example, in my case as the Yield Hub, I think that I can make the commitment to organize an action learning group where we can come together and discuss how to improve financing for youth, the youth movement. And I would love to invite UNFPA and FP2030 to this group where we really roll our sleeves and we go through the 6-month commitment to have a concrete plan, design a solution, implement the solution. I will not lock the door until you find the solution, Dr. Sam. It will be an online process, but I would love to invite you, and of course the GRA as well, to be part of this, because we have the four organizations part of this who have great insights into the problem, and also we'll find a solution together, because it's a matter of saying yes, it's time, it's now or never. Otherwise, it will be 20 years, small grants, seed funding. But here it's a matter of saying this is the solution that we find, and I'm pretty sure that other funders will be very interested in the topic, and also all other implementers, NGOs, will be interested in this.
And perhaps I can just say that I started my intervention by reflecting back on the ICPD 1994. When I was a very young person, and many of you were not yet born, I guess. We are now celebrating the 30th anniversary next year. Many of you were with us in Nairobi 4 years ago. And I'm very pleased to announce that we will be having 3 global consultations, and one of them will be with young people. And so that shows also, I think, the commitment of UNFPA for young people. That we really prioritize what young people have to say. I think it's important that the ICT agenda, I went through the whole program of action with my team recently, and it's very extensive. And you think it has only been written yesterday. It talks about all the issues which we are still facing: environmental degradation, migration, SOHR, etc. So what we really hope is that the young people community of today comes together and helps us reinvigorate the program for action, which, as I say, we believe is as current as it can be, and just to come together and see how can we work to have new champions for this agenda and move it forward. And I'm very sure that in that global consultation, which will be happening early next year, so stay tuned on that, we will discuss funding and funding for youth organization. How can we make sure that the youth movement around SOHR, around the ICPD is as vibrant as ever, and you can count on UNFPA as your biggest ally, and I would say stay tuned.
So don't forget to invite GRA.
Absolutely not, you're on the list.
Or the GRA could help co-organize.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So.
And bring your purse too for funding.
Yes, bring your purse as well. We are almost at time, so any of the last thoughts?
I think if there's something that I want to ask UNFPA.
Not FP2030.
Yeah, but one thing I want to throw to the panelists is really around power shifting, because when we're talking about power shifting, we're looking at maybe how money is moving from adult-led organizations to youth-led organizations, but also the culture with which organizations operate and work with young people. We have been talking about youth-led organizations, but Danielle, you did mention how we also see young people move in and out of these organizations. Mm-hmm. Some of them are absorbed into well-established institutions like yours. What is it, or what do you think your organization can do better to see how these young people who are coming are not seen as people who don't have potential, who don't have expertise, who don't have technical knowledge that they bring, but they can be seen as experts in what they are coming to do, and they are given the room to fully work in the work environment and explore their potentials and grow like everyone else in the organization, and not left to certain positions. This is where you are, and this is the benchmark for you. Unless you have 20 years on your CV, you cannot access this and you cannot access that. Yeah, just to find out if there is a commitment that you can make towards that as well.
I'm probably not the best place to make a commitment for the whole organization on young people, even though you have me as an ally inside UNFPA. But I can say that again, I have been in the organization for quite some time, and culture has been shifting. UNFPA at least is putting the what did I say, the money where the mouth is, or some kind of a smile. We have a network of young professionals. We have many young professionals coming from the youth-led organizations whom we have been working. We also see young youth leaders who work with UNFPA being now ministers in some countries. Very encouraging. We're very excited about that. So it's a two-way street, I guess. We have in UNFPA an organization called the Tangerines. They are the smaller, better smelling orange, so younger. So that's the group of young staff members in UNFPA, which are well recognized even at the level of our executive director, and who really are vocal not only, and I think that's important to underline, on youth issues, but on any issues UNFPA is dealing with, including organizational culture and other, because young people have a say, have a vision, have an idea on the world around us. Not just they are not just experts on youth; they also should have a say on other areas. So I see there is that trend, and there is certainly a space, at least in UNFPA, for young people to thrive. In my team, we have 8 people. Most of them are very young. They are the ones driving the agenda. So I would say, come and join us, and we need you, and we'll be in touch.
So can I add, because I believe that what you are saying, Jackie, is real progress will occur when I believe when we too offer power to solve these real challenges, power, and we are courageous and vulnerable. I'm not Brené Brown, but she loves talking about the vulnerability, because you are saying take a chance and take a risk, because the tradition, the status quo says no, you can't mentor them. They are in almost like a youth corner. There is a glass ceiling for the youth. It's like, unless if you have this experience, you cannot thrive, which is what you are asking us to change. And I think we should commit to ensure that young people within our organizations can lead large portfolios, global portfolios, and they are enabled to do so. Because what that takes is that it will take time from me to actually make sure I work with that young person so that they see the bigger picture, so that they can lead from wherever they are. That takes time, that takes commitment. At times it takes even resources within the organization to do that. And that's what I think, you will help me within FP2030 to actually do and give away that political capital for young people to actually thrive within an organization, because I know that we are guilty of that. Because I'm like, how youth at times, they've got this nice hairstyle. I'm like, it's the white dreadlocks, right? And whatever. And then they're like, but you can't go to a board meeting like that. But why not? Why can't they, right? It's the change of mindset from the establishment to actually do things differently, see things differently. And again, maybe to conclude, I believe that any problem can be solved with the right people in the room, right people around the table. Let's bring the youth and hear them out and hear their perspectives. Invest in them, allow them to lead. Where they may not lead like you or whatever, it doesn't mean that is wrong. It may mean it's different.
Well, that was a great closing.
Take a chance on me while you're speaking. On the edit, yeah, it's perfect.
Well then, I feel like that wrapped us up really nicely. Well, thank you all. So I've heard an interest in creating accountability mechanisms. I've heard an interest in helping with leadership and capacity building for youth-led organizations as well as non-youth-led organizations. And I've heard of a lot of interest around funding for youth-led organizations. So we have our action learning circles that are going to be happening, and as well as partnerships with UNFPA that we hope to establish to help kind of ease some of those barriers and rethink what youth-led organizations funding looks like. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. I like to remind us to carry this momentum forward. Let this not just be a conversation. We have some tangible action items that we should all be following up on. So let's make sure that we stay on track and we move these conversations to actual action items so they can be actual progress. So with that, I like to close with, again, referencing back to the Let Them Know tagline. So in addition to let them know what we want and what we need and what we expect, today we let them know collectively that we are working together to advance adolescents and youth sexual and reproductive health through collaboration, through shared problem solving. And so I thank you all for joining me. And I know we're wrapping up. I think that's it. Thank you.